Welcome, everybody, to the best and worst performer predictions for week 6 from CFF lists. We'll also be doing a recap of the week 5 performances from everybody at every position's year to date leaders lists. I'm Jay Mill. As usual, I got my partner, Willie B. How we doing, Willie? We're approaching the halfway mark this week. It's week 6. This will be the halfway mark as we finish up this week.
Yeah, I'm ready. Ready to extend this lead.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's good. I knew that was coming, so I would just remind everybody that we are a balanced team, and Willie has been doing a much better job at the best worst performances, while I have been taking the lead in the waiver watch draft. So, uh,
Yep.
I would suggest at this point for waivers, maybe lean a little more heavily towards me for picking your start sit options and your daily
Whoa,
fantasy
whoa, whoa,
situations.
whoa,
Let's go to Willie
whoa
B.
now. Whoa now. I know I took a shot at you, but let's rein it back in just
All
a
right.
little bit.
All
Okay.
right, all right. Well, I'd say collectively, we both do a pretty decent job still. So you've got I think it sounds worse than it is. You've got an 11-point lead. And then maybe it also sounds worse than it is that I've got a 4-1 lead on you in the head-to-head over there at the waiver watch. So
Yeah, yeah.
but we are at the halfway mark. We've both got to turn it around on each. As usual, scroll up, Willie. We'll look at the standings. Looks like here we go. Willie is in purple. I'm in red. This week he had 11 points. I had 5. That one is a little bit deceiving because I had a lot of top 3 finishes that only got me a point. But Willie kind of knocked it out of the park for the second week this year with 10 points. We'll discuss where those came from as we recap week 5 and look at those players. But he does hold a pretty commanding lead here with 25 points for myself and 36 for him. So I've got to just instead of getting these second and third place guys, I've got to pick some absolute winners at the best and worst competition here.
hmm
And we got to do a quick. I know our usual folks are probably here. If you happen to stumble on it new, we like to give ourselves. We like to go through each year-to-date leaders list by position, try to predict the winners, try to predict the losers in terms of who's going to have the best and worst weeks. If we pick the person from the list with the best week, we get 3 points. If we pick the worst, we get 3 points. 2 points for the second place finish. Third place gets us 1 point. But we will recap the scoring from the last week as we go. Jumping right in, Willie. I guess the story of the year is one, we've got 2 tight ends averaging over 20 points a game. One of them probably really isn't a tight end, but it doesn't matter. He's listed that way on Fantrack. But Fannin and Beck now, with the back-to-back top 2 performances, not only in the top 16 or top 12, but the top 2 tight end performances overall out of anyone. Fannin took it this week with 42 points, 43 points almost. Beck had another 30-plus game, which I think gives him 3 in a row. Is anybody one? It's hard to just get double digits as a tight end. 15 to 16 would typically kind of be enough to lead this list. As you can see, Warren's in there at third place with 19 going into last week. Gadsden had 18. Usually that settles in about 17 or 18 points for the number one guy. We'll talk about them, I guess, when we get to the updated list. But we couldn't go past the week 5 recap without just talking about these two. And if anybody's going to come close to catching these two by the end of the season to finish in the top 2 tight ends, or is it just Fannin and Beck battling all year long among themselves?
Well, I mean, you can't just I won't just say that, but I mean, Keithy, you have to, he's always going to be, hovering around.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect that number to come up just a little bit. Same thing with Tanner Kozol. Um, I'm really just I'm dumbfounded as what's going on in Middle Tennessee, and because you have Holden Willis, who
Yep.
is almost that type. I mean, maybe he's just not as athletic as Beck is,
Right.
but there's no reason for him to be as far as he is. So that to me is a disappointment. But as far as the top 2 guys, it may I think it's going to be a 3 to 4 man race, and unfortunately, I think Gadsden's going to be the odd man out.
Okay,
But
that's
that's just
interesting.
me.
Yeah, I know his production went down last week. And since we're talking about week five, he only had 1.4, which is where you scored three of your points this week. Since he was the worst performing tight end among the top 12, you called it correctly, seeing that he was going against Holy Cross. You didn't know if he'd really play that much or if they'd need him. Um, just looking, they ended up winning the game 42-14. He ended up with 7 targets, but amazing. There's your surprise, I guess, for the week. They did actually looks like target him quite a bit, but he only had 1 catch out of those 7 targets. I don't know because I didn't see that game. I don't know if anybody really wanted to watch Holy Cross Syracuse, but not sure if that was his fault or just bad passes by
Well, I
McCoy.
mean, yeah, I mean, he had 64 snaps, and that was actually the most for
Mhm.
the season for him,
Yeah.
also. So, I mean, that's really interesting.
Yeah, because he's
Yeah.
getting a target still. He's just even the week before he caught 2 out of 5. That's not very efficient. Week three he had 6 out of 8, and still wasn't even very efficient in week one, 7 out of 12. So I don't know again if that's haven't really paid attention enough to know if that's a quarterback accuracy issue or if they're just throwing it to him when he's covered and he can't get open and he's
Hmm.
not catching passes. That's something to keep an eye on, but. Um, you know, We'll see. But the other two you mentioned maybe being in that race, are you thinking Keithy? You did mention him, and Koziol maybe as your fourth
Hmm.
guy that could make a run here for the top spot. He had 22.8 this week, finishing as the third best, which is where I got one of my points. I correctly called that performance. Looks like he's going to be really consistent. Maybe just not the kind of guy to be able to get in the 30s and 40s like those two at the top, but he's proven to be very consistent this year with a couple games in the 20s and now one at 17.7.
Yeah, I mean, Ball State's defense is not the best. So, they're going to have to, light up the scoreboard to, be in contention. I mean, they're almost dead last.
Yeah,
Right there next to Middle Tennessee State as far as passing defense. So, he's going to have opportunities,
yeah. And I misspoke.
is all I can say.
I was looking at the wrong number. His average going into last week was 17.7. He had 22.8 last week, following his
Hmm.
26 points from the week before and 18 in week one. So there you go. The worst performers here besides Gadsden. Uh, I had predicted Brenningstool wouldn't do so well. That turned out to be accurate. He had 8.8. However, that was only the fourth worst because you had Loveland, who did play. We know he's been injured, but they still threw him in there at 8.1, and then Mason Taylor with 7.3. So let's see now how that shook things up among the current year-to-date leaders at the tight end spot. Um, it looks like we only had now again halfway through the season. This is what you expect. 10 out of the 12 are the same. So let's just look at our biggest movement. You had a flip flop at 1 and 2. Fannin took over the lead by about a point and a half. Koziol has now moved up into third place, averaging 19 a game, followed by
Hmm.
Tyler Warren at 17.9, and then Keithy's kind of holding tight there in the fifth spot at 15.3. Gadsden stumbled, went down a couple spots to the tight end 6 from number 4. The new names, though, we mentioned a couple guys left. It was Max Clare from Purdue and Terrence Carter, who didn't do enough to remain in the top 16, but they're replaced by a guy that I believe you picked up in the waiver watch this week, Matthew Louder.
That is correct. Yeah, from Boise.
Yeah, so maybe repeat kind of what you liked about Louder there and why I know you actually took a tight end first, if I'm not mistaken. He stood out so much for you at tight end there in the waiver watch as far as his potential.
Yeah, because obviously, with the tight end position and and being in the where we are in the season, there aren't going to be that many gems left at tight end.
Right.
So I just felt like, I better go ahead and get him. I don't have our screen pulled up from the waiver watch, but he's rostered at 33% now. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
um
some people
he,
have
he's
also
he's
discovered him there. Yeah.
Right, right. And he's had 47.7 points combined the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So he had a 22.1 against Portland State, and then, turned it around and, against a much better competition against Washington State with a 25.6.
Yeah. Yeah. So it looks like he's again. had a big game this week with 2 touchdowns, but he got his 22 points the week before with just 1 touchdown, but it was spread out over 7 catches, 90 yards, and that 1 touchdown. So yeah, I think based on doing it back to back, don't expect the 2 touchdowns, but don't expect him to disappear. He seems to
Hmm.
be emerging as the guy there that they're going to look for. Probably expect those 5 to 6 targets a game. If you can couple that with 50 or 60 yards, there's your 10 points that you're hoping for from any tight end. Then when he gets his touchdowns, they'll elevate you closer to the 20-point range like he did this week. So it's a good one. He moved all the way up from 27. The other new name is somebody that's been on my radar, which is Dorian Fleming from Georgia State. Unfortunately, he's got a bye this week, so he wouldn't be able to produce for you this week if you've got him. Obviously, he's not going to be able to play, but he's a guy that's just again hasn't he's scored 2 touchdowns, but the last 2 weeks he's had 13-8 and 10-9, had a 16.8 in week one. So he's exactly what I just described Louder probably turning into a guy that's going to get 5 to 6 catches every single week for 50 or 60 yards. It's good for 9 or 10 points. So Dorian Fleming is a name we always talk about, kind of who pops in and if they'll stay. I would say Fleming and Louder are both guys that I could see staying on this list, even ahead of the 2 guys that dropped out with Max Clare and Terrence Carter. I think they've got a more likely chance of being here next week. Well, we know Fleming probably will be with his bye, but I think they'd be here at the end, even over Clare and Terrence Carter at this point, from what we've seen with the consistency now that's emerging.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's only the only other names that I would probably say to watch out for. I love what Royer is doing at Cincinnati.
Yep.
Nesbitt, now that he's a little bit healthier,
Yeah.
that's another one to look out for. So
Right.
those are just two that are hovering around just outside the top 12.
Yeah, it looks like Royer is barely out. He's at 12.0 versus 12.1. So yeah, he's
Hmm.
just dangling out there outside the top 12. So all right. Am I starting us off with the first pick?
You're first again. Yep.
Okay. It is right at the top. It's really hard to go against either one of these top two. And I need points, so I don't know why I would do that. Since I've got the first pick, give me Fannin going against Akron, who is the 79th worst team against fantasy tight ends. We also kind of like to cross-reference that with how they're doing in the passing game. They're 76th also against the pass. They've given up 12 touchdowns and 160 yards a game. That's the quarterback rating. The yards per game, they're giving up 217, but they've given up 12 touchdowns. So
Hmm.
I think Fannin has another big one. At this point, a lot of people you don't expect to get in the end zone every week, but I would expect his usual catches and probably get in the end zone again. So hopefully he can get another 20 for me.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we have a rule against this, but since it is a competition, you've already taken your best, which I honestly I think you probably should have taken someone else. But I'm gonna take my worst if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. We don't have to
Yeah,
go in
so
particular
yeah,
order.
so yeah, I'm gonna take my worst. We're gonna go Eli Stores, and they got Alabama this week.
Yep.
Um, so it might be a little rougher for him to keep his average. He's averaging what 12.9.
Mm-hmm.
He actually had 12.7 against Missouri, but I think Alabama's defense is a little bit better than that. So I'm gonna probably say he's gonna be around that 6.5
Points.
this week.
Okay. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to see. He's the guy that really jumped on the radar 2 weeks ago with 17 targets. I wanted to see kind of where
Yeah,
that.
he had 10.
Oh,
He had 10 against Missouri.
right.
He
And
had
then he had
10
a bye.
targets.
Okay. So we don't. Yeah, we were curious to see how he'd follow up 17 and 10 targets. He
Hmm.
did have the bye, so we've got to wait till this Alabama game now to see if that double-digit target uh, keeps up with him. That is definitely a good one. Um, Man, a lot of guys at the top there facing teams that are really bad against tight ends with Koziel and Warren, so I can't pick them as my worst. Um, yeah, you know what? Give me Colston Loveland. I don't know that he's completely healthy. He did play last week. He didn't do so well. He finished in the bottom three last week. He's going against a tough Washington defense, um, who is sixth against the pass, only giving up 2 TDs.
Wow.
So that's a nice counter to my Fannin pick, where they've given up 12 at Akron. So, yeah, again, the fact that he's been banged up, he's going against a really tough pass D there at Washington. I'm pretty happy with the Loveland pick for this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, looking at Loveland, I mean, he's getting his points from just reception and yardage. He only has that one score all season.
Yep.
So I mean, for him to be have average 13, I mean that's pretty decent. But
Yeah.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Until they can get into the end zone, he's
Yeah.
going to be a little low.
Yeah. We'll point out. Yeah, he's his average is still up there. He's kind of coasting off of his first 2 weeks. He's had six and
Hmm.
only 6 and 8 in these last two. But again, we did realize he got hurt, I believe, 2 weeks ago against Arkansas State, and wasn't even sure if he was going to play last week against Minnesota, but he still got his 5 targets. So,
Yeah.
but
So I mean, so the obvious choice for me, as far as my best for the week, and we've got to just go with Jack Beck until someone can show that they can slow him down.
yeah,
And so they're at home against Houston this
yeah,
week.
let's get precise on his numbers because he, like anybody that's done what he's done it for 3 weeks in a row, deserves a special shout out. 35 points, 36.6, and 35.1, averaging 11 targets and had double digit targets in all three of those games. And totally
Hmm.
opposite of Gadsden, he caught 9 out of 11, 8 out of 10, and 10 out of 12 the last 3 weeks. So again, I don't know if that's
Well,
saying something about Hoover or if that's saying about something about him and his hands or both, but
well, and
yeah.
they
Yeah, and he'd be averaging over 30 points if they didn't play LIU in week 2, and obviously they didn't need to.
exactly.
He had 2 targets in a 45-0 game and just basically had a bye week that week.
Yeah. So he's been up.
Yeah, and that one we know why that one really shouldn't even count. He is a legitimate 30-point tight end right now if you've got him on your roster. That's amazing. I don't know if we've ever seen that through the halfway point of any season.
Right.
All right,
We'll
let's
have to we'll have to look, at least not in our time, but we'll
that's
have to take a look at that.
very crazy. Yeah, let's move on up to the receivers. Um, Top dog Nick Nash, he had a bye week. Ty Felton came down to earth. It looks like Prater his teammate outshined him this week. He only ended up with 8.8. And then, kind of glancing here, the top performer out of the last week's top 16 looks like was Trey Harris, who is another guy that's been wildly consistent. Um, he does have a red flag this week. Let's see what that said. He's questionable whether or not he'll play in the next game. Uh, yeah, so we got to definitely keep an eye on that. I know the SEC has promised to put out legitimate injury reports, so keep your eye out on Trey Harris going into the next week's game. Uh, yeah, it says they're unlikely to reveal anything more about it, but he is questionable. But we were talking about his consistency. He's had 4 games over 19. Actually, all 5 of his games are over 19 points this week or this year, Willie. He's had 3 over 34 points, another 40, including a 45, a 22, and a 19. So he's that's about as good as it gets. And a couple of those games, he didn't even have touchdowns and still managed 19 and 22 points because he's he's got 1, 2, 3, like 50 catches here. What is it? 50 catches in his 5.
Yeah, that is right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So it's a shame he might be injured, and you got to wonder if you should play him this week. But we'll keep that in mind when we go to the next screen. Not yet, but when we talk about that in the next screen. But he was your top performer out of the top 16, that's for sure. Followed by
The
looks
youngster,
which one? Hunter.
Ryan Williams.
Oh, Ryan Williams. Yeah, yeah, Ryan. Oh, yes. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. That was my pick as the worst pick. I thought maybe the true freshman would freeze up a little bit against one of the better defenses, if not the best defense in college football. Interesting thing for me, I wasn't really far off base with my prediction until the final play of the game, because as
No.
anybody watching college football noticed, it was a 75-yard touchdown, which in most leagues is a 13 or 14-point play. And he ended up with 29.7. So he doubled his score on one play
Hmm.
in that last play of the game, finished with 29.7 going into that play, probably had 15 points in most leagues. So it's, again, I had picked him as my worst. One play threw me off, but every play counts. So I was totally wrong on that. He was your second best, followed by your guy, Travis Hunter, that you predicted as the best, who got you a point there, finishing third place. Maybe oh, yeah, I was just glancing quickly here. You're right. You're right.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
all right, but I'll still give you props because that's
Yeah.
where when we don't score, it doesn't mean we were always wrong.
No.
Willie
Right.
B
Right.
had called Travis Harris for the best. He ended up with another 24 points. Um, should anybody even be close in the Heisman discussion if you're really giving the Heisman to the best college football player at this point? I'm in the group
I
that
just
says no.
I don't see it. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
It's not even close
it,
in my book right now.
no,
I mean,
no. I mean, he
defense.
is, man, I'm
Hmm.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, and exactly. And I agree. I wanted to touch that. Before we leave this page, the three worst ended up being Pat Bryant, where Willie did. That's three more points you got there. He was the worst, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Which you correctly predicted against Penn State. Second worst was Devontae Ross, who had up until this point been very consistent, getting 20 plus points in most games. And then you had Ty Felton, who just took a break this week. Decided he was going to let his buddy there, Prater, catch more balls than him. And then I had predicted Wysong from New Mexico having a big one against New Mexico State. That didn't work out. He only got me 11.2, and we don't need to talk about that one much more
Yeah,
with
because you
Devontae
had
Ross.
Ross.
Yeah, that's not the team that you expect to shut you down. And since we've got but interestingly, it could be that we just overlooked them. Louisiana Monroe in the season has only given up 3 pass TDs and 180 yards. Maybe they've really got a pass defense that is the real deal. Well, I mean, I guess again that's Fantrax's rank against
Hmm.
receivers.
Right,
They're only
right.
38th in the passing game overall, but only 3 TDs, including this week.
Hmm.
Including
Yeah,
Lee. So
yeah.
that's
That's something to look at then.
yeah, pretty stout. Once now that Sunbelt's starting, we can't discount teams that are. We shouldn't look past teams that are playing Louisiana Monroe anymore. I guess is what we learned this week. There's actually
Hmm.
something maybe to those notes there.
Right.
So, all right, let's see how things shook up on the list here. Going to the new top 16 for the wide receivers. Um, this had the biggest turnover of any position. There were actually 5 receivers that didn't manage to stick around. You had Pritchett from South Alabama, Presley from Oklahoma State, Bryant, who we mentioned having a poor game there for Illinois, Restrepo, and then my guy Wysong. So 2 of the guys we talked about, Bryant and Wysong. But then you had Pritchett, South Alabama, who's been the clear number 1 guy there. Trying to see who they played, who shut him down. That looks like he got the red flag. So
Yes.
he must have gotten hurt during the game, but looks like they are expecting him back for this week. He only ended up with
Yeah, he
4
got a
targets.
concussion.
So yeah. Oh yeah, and that was against LSU. Okay, so that's. I guess we're not surprised there. I forgot they
Yeah.
played LSU, so that makes sense.
Well, he has some concussion too, so
Okay.
that might factor in.
Yeah, could factor into this week for sure.
Hmm.
Well, we don't have to pick him this week because he fell off the list. So, all
Right.
right. Your new guys, Tez Johnson's back on the list after a 35-point game. Denzel Boston, everybody wondered when the season was getting started who the wide receiver one at Washington might be. A lot of people called that one correctly with Denzel Boston, but he's there with Giles Jackson, Jeremiah Hunter. He's separating himself from that group. He had 30. You got Dante Wright, who's been off and on the top 16. He wasn't far out. He was at 18. He's back in it with a 24-point game. Then you had Ja'Cory Brooks, who I think has been here at one point earlier in the season. Didn't come from far out either. Was in the top 25 as 23. He's wide receiver 15. And then same situation for Kyle Williams. He was here early, had a couple lighter games, but made the biggest jump. He had 29.6, managed to get his average up to 20.3 to take this number 16 spot from Washington State. So anybody stand out among those new guys? Tez Johnson, Ja'Cory Brooks, Denzel Boston. Any comments on those guys, Willie? Right.
To see some ducks on the lists.
Yeah. And real quick, going back to Boston, he's had back-to-back 30-point games, and he's now had 2 touchdowns in 3 of their 5 games there at Washington. So I'd say, I like to use the word fluke a lot. It looks like he is not a fluke, with the production he's putting up. My note about Brooks would be that Lacey is finally healthy. He had broke his collarbone, I think, in preseason. Maybe I've got the actual injury wrong, but Lacey is actually back. He appeared against Notre Dame. Tough game to come back, but he had 12.2 points and 8 targets. So you may just keep an eye on Brooks' production there with Lacey back in the mix, maybe potentially taking away some of those targets now that they can spread it out a little more among Lacy and Brooks because he is officially back.
So
Right.
now this whole time.
Right. So basically, he's been a top 25 guy. You just haven't seen him
Yes.
top 16
Right.
for us to talk
Yep.
about. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, with that, let's see who you got as your top or worst pick here. You're starting us off at receiver. Yep. Two
And
guys on a bye, or no, three guys on a bye. Kyle Williams,
mhm.
Travis Hunter, and Ty Felton. So we won't be choosing from them. Okay.
I
Yeah,
know he's going
six. They've given up 6 touchdowns.
to.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
middle of the
So
pack. Yeah, about
okay. So
okay. Well, I've done this a couple times this year, and I'm looking at that 103rd versus wide receivers jump out for Vanderbilt. So, again, I think it's the third time I've done it this year. I'm going to take Ryan Williams after picking him as the worst guy last week. He's opened my eyes a little bit to not be a doubter and a hater. And I do like the kid. It wasn't because of that. It was more of the matchup
mhm.
last week. But, yeah, I think he keeps riding the momentum there. And, he's, he was my pick, I think. Oh no, you had picked him over me as probably the one to finish higher between him and Jeremiah Smith. But yeah, let's see. Let's see how that could change now.
Well,
After
I'm going to wish you the best.
all right, I appreciate it.
I
Oh, which
think
one?
I'll
One of
have.
the guys with an injury? Who are you talking
Yeah.
about there? We just
I
not.
guess
Yeah,
is what we're saying.
we've turned that rock over and discovered Louisiana Monroe is a better pasty than anybody ever imagined. Yep.
Let's see.
A lot of favorable matchups, as we like to point out for
Right. Right.
the receivers. I'm seeing how real the Michigan is interesting. Michigan's 103rd against the pass this year, and you got Boston playing them. Well, while you think, I was like just looking at other players with potential for this week. That's got. Yep.
Let's
Okay.
see.
I think I know which way I'm going to lean, but I'll let you still make the pick ahead.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We're going to put pressure on you. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
We'll
was
go
one
with
I was
Josh Kelly.
considering. Again, the disclaimer that we throw out every week doesn't mean we necessarily think he'll have a poor game, but 12 or 13 or 15 points might get you the category of worst performer. Looking at this list this week, he's facing a number 60 Arizona team who's given up 7 touchdowns, but somehow are still just 33rd in terms of what they give up to fantasy wide receivers. So maybe not as many yards. Yeah, 201 yards. Um, all right, I'll move us along here. I'm going to go with the guy I mentioned for some of the reasons that I mentioned, which is Lacy being back. I'll go Ja'Cory Brooks. Um, you know, you pointed out he's getting catches and yards. He's not scoring a ton of touchdowns. Um,
Hmm.
they're not playing Notre Dame. Lacy was getting his feet wet there. I think Lacy gets a little closer to matching Brooks's numbers, or they start to divide the targets a little more heavily. Um, and
Maybe
yeah,
that's what. So yeah, I
let's
like
think.
that.
Yeah, they're not completely. Yeah, they are on the second half in terms of giving up points against receivers and where they rank in terms of the actual list. But like I said, more because of who's coming back with Lacy being back and having a kind of a decent debut there against Notre Dame, which was much tougher than SMU. Uh, I just think that he's going to start to see a little bit of his volume decline.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
all right. So
All right.
we will
Let's.
now move on to the running backs, where we're just going to be beating the same old drum here. The Jinty drum, as he just popped off with another 51-point game for our guy Jinty. That one was late at night. I was actually out of the house, so I didn't get to see how it all went down. Did you happen to catch it? His second 250-yard game of the season. Mm-hmm.
That type of electricity.
Yep.
It's just fun to watch. It just really is.
Let's do a fun Barry Sanders comparison because in terms of history, that's the only thing that's come close, I think. And I'm just looking up a few of the records Barry has. Amazingly, as good as Ginty's doing, he is not on pace yet to even match Barry Sanders' 2,600 yards that he had back in 1989. They're saying Barry Sanders had the most yards in a 4-game span with 1,152. So, I mean, that's how incredible Barry was. Like we're sitting there looking at Ginty saying, "Wow, he's got 845 yards in 4 games." Barry had the
Hmm.
4-game stretch where he had 1,100 yards back when he set all the records, which is pretty incredible. So the bigger question is, can Ginty get to the 2,600-yard mark and pass Barry Sanders? Since he does, I believe, have the extra game. He's a third of his way through the season. he would finish at about 2,500 if he maintains this pace right now. Can he get to 2,600?
Yeah, I never know. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not gonna say he can't.
Yeah, the pace he's on to beat Barry is Barry had 37 touchdowns, and he is on pace now for 39. So while he might come close in yards, I'm going to say he won't get the yards. But I'm going to say he beats the 37 touchdowns and actually gets closer to 40 there, which would be amazing, just simply amazing. Mm-hmm.
And he already has 13.
Yeah, and he had who do you have there? It was the Martinez sharing the what wasn't he sharing with no I can't remember who he was sharing with last year, but he had always kind of been in that situation where he was sharing with the older guy that never left. I'm gonna pull the name here.
Hmm.
Yep.
He's
Yeah.
not putting it
Oh,
on the he's not putting it on the ground anymore.
here you go. He, for the first 2 years of his career, he had to share the backfield with Halani. Remember,
Hmm.
Halani was like
Yes.
the 1,000-yard guy, but he kind of finally doubled up his yards last year. He had 1,300 to Halani's 700 plus. But all right, so that's our praise for GT. We got to keep it moving. But okay, you're saying he does not meet Barry Sanders' 26-20 mark. Okay, and I'm saying he'll get
Yeah,
the
and
mark of
we'll
37.
revisit it. Yeah.
All right, nice. Fun discussion either way. So he was the clear leader. Second best running back was Mario Anderson at 28.1. And then you had a tie there for third with PJ Harvey, where I finally got a point there at running back, along with Brashard Smith from SMU, who had another big game. The worst performances were
Ontario Brown.
Yeah, Ontario Brown, who was 16th, and Dean Connors, who was 15th. You'll see on the next slide, neither one of them made it around because of that. And then, surprisingly, Jaquindon Jackson, third worst at 16-6, which it's one of those things we talk about. That's not horrible. That's not a horrible game, but compared to the numbers he was putting up, it was a down game.
Yeah.
Classic,
What?
your third worst running back still having 16 points. Parrish, 17.0.
Okay.
That's what I saw. Yeah.
So
Oh,
we may have to visit that one and
okay, so
yeah, take that one off.
I just cost myself a point. But yeah, I did
Yeah.
pick
So
Parrish as the worst. He ended up as fourth worst according to my records, third worst according to Willie B. And then Tootin has proved us both wrong in back-to-back weeks. Maybe we never go against him again because he's motivated when we do that. He I think had close to 30 when I picked him last week against Rutgers. He had 24.8 this week, pretty much his average against Miami.
hmm
So. But yeah, let's see how that resulted in terms of the new top 16. For again, we mentioned the performances overall, even among the worst guys, were very good down there in the 16, 17 point range. So 14 of the 16 are the same. Only the number 15 and 16 backs got bumped out, which were Connors and Brown. The new guys weren't hovering too far below that. Darius Taylor is back in. He was
hmm
19th. He's now 12th. He had a 31-point game. And then Heidenreich is the latest Navy name to enter the conversation here at running back, along with their quarterback, who we'll talk about later. But yeah, Heidenreich worked his way up from the number 21 spot. So two backs that have also, been putting up pretty consistent numbers. They weren't too far outside the top 16 that deserve to be here now. So with that, again, we covered not too many left, not too many new ones. So let's jump right into our picks here for who we think will have the best performances this week.
All right. So is it?
Or worse.
I'm first or
No, I'm
for
first
you?
now, so I guess
Okay.
I've got to
Good.
go with this. And um, I'm not going to be too creative. We talked about him. He's playing Utah State, who's not very good. I had the first pick. It doesn't mean you can't pick him also. We remind people you could also pick Jinty as your best player if you want. But I'm certainly not going to miss the opportunity to take him first. It's Utah State 112th against, well, that's the pass. I guess I better look at, I don't really care what they're ranked, frankly, when it's Jinty. But in terms of their number, they're actually 33rd against the run. Somehow they're 126th in terms of giving up points to running backs. That's where Fantrax baffles us sometimes. They've only given up one. Well, if I'd find the right Utah, I could speak correctly. That was Utah. Never mind, guys. Utah State is 115th against the run. Now it makes more sense what Fantrax is telling us here. Um, Giving up 8 touchdowns and nearly 200 yards a game. So I'm gonna go with the guaranteed money here with Ginty. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say Ginty gets another 200 to make the Barry Sanders conversation even more fun.
Yeah. Wow. But
Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that ran 192 against Oregon. Why would we not think he can't get 200 against Utah State?
yeah.
You know,
One.
who else you seeing here? Since we picked the same, who else are you going to officially make him your pick?
Yeah, I'm gonna officially make him my pick.
Okay. Yeah. How is RJ Harvey's playing Florida? It says. How are they playing Florida when conference play starts? Is what I'm wondering.
Well, French
Yeah,
play.
that's a weird week to have a non-conference game, but it is what it is. But it's accurate. So uh, you'd expect a big game from him, though, based on the numbers we're seeing. And I guess, as I go through this, we'll see if Desmond Reed is healthy. I'm not sure what the status is. I'm going to stay away from him in both cases. Dylan Sampson's got a tough one against Tennessee. Caleb Johnson, a tough one against Ohio State. But, man, and you really want to go against Tootin again. He's playing this Stanford, who's fifth against running backs. Monangai, second. On paper, a lot of really tough matchups. Jaquindon Jackson's going against the toughest team with Tennessee. Monangai against the second toughest. Tootin against the fifth toughest. And Brashard Smith against the eighth toughest. So I'll go with Brashard Smith. We can't doubt Tootin anymore. And I've seen Monangai and Jackson play probably as much as I've watched any running backs closely. To doubt they'll be able to have decent games, even though they're playing tough defenses. So I'll go with Brashard Smith against Louisville. Okay.
They haven't given up a rushing touchdown. So I gotta go.
Yeah,
So
that's a really tough one for sure. Just double checking those Tennessee numbers. Tennessee's only given up 150 yards a game going against Arkansas. So, I'm wondering. Yeah, I guess I'll stick with Smith though.
no, you don't have to. I mean, now's the time. Now's the time to switch it.
Okay, let me double check my Louisville numbers here. One more
All
cross.
right.
5 touchdowns, 94 yards. I'll just keep it the same. I like Jackson too much to go against him. He's been my favorite running back to watch this year, so
Okay.
I'll stick with the Brashard Smith pick
So
against Ohio State.
take.
Yeah, but I would say as a whole, as good as we thought the running backs would do last week, and they did, this could be a week where you don't plug a running back into your flex spot if you don't have to. If it's one of the guys from this top 16 list, I see this group kind of probably struggling more than they usually do because a lot of good running backs playing really good run defenses. So,
yeah.
All right. Let's wrap this thing up with the quarterbacks. Again, just looking at who did the best. Milroe had that grand finale there in the Georgia game at 46.7. And again, we're using 4-point touchdowns, for our league, since that seems to be the norm. Some do 6, which would have got you even more points. But Alonzo Barnett, the JMU quarterback who kind of came out of nowhere, not only had his back-to-back 5 touchdown games, but led JMU to their second game in a row with over 63 points. 70 a week ago, where's North Carolina, and 63 this week, as predicted by Willie B. Against a horrible Ball State defense. That's going to be the team you want to play all your fantasy guys against this year. We've determined.
Yes.
Yeah. And your output there by Barnett getting you the second best score, and then third best was our guy. Looks like there's one on 40s. Who is this? We got to zoom in to see him. Cameron Ward. Yeah, Cameron Ward had 41.4. So continues to
impress
and be one of the more consistent guys. Quickly looking at the worst, we had
Lopez, Taylor Green.
Lopez, again, as predicted. That was a prediction by Willie B. Really knocked it out of the park here with the quarterbacks with 14 against LSU. Jackson Dart, who I predicted, had 16.6. That was the third best, Willie. Yeah, and then Taylor Green, Arkansas, had a rough outing there against A&M. So yeah, we kind of nailed it as far as steering you away from the guys that had the bad games this week. And then Cade Klubnik had a solid game, really good game, I should say, 37. And looking there, Dampier, 35 points. Bryson Daly, 35. So as predicted last week when we talked about it, we thought there were a lot of good matchups, and you're not finding many with bad ones here. Most of these quarterbacks got over 20 or 25 points this week. So based,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's see how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll give Kyle McCord 30 because rounded up it is. So 1, 2,
Mm-hmm.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of the 14 that played. 8 out of 14 at 30 plus. That's pretty amazing quarterback week.
Right.
Yep. Okay. And we are now 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's move on to the current standings. And see what we got here as far as the shakeup. As expected, with what we just told you, not too many quarterbacks departed. 14 out of the 16 are the same, like the running backs. Taylon Green, who was your second worst, and Haynes King, who happened to have a bye, got knocked out on a bye week because so many quarterbacks had good weeks, jumped off. Chandler Morris from North Texas is now in. Came in from the number 18 spot, and Garrett Nussmeyer, a name I didn't expect because I wasn't following that LSU beatdown too closely. I didn't realize he had such a good game with 37 points against Southern Alabama, but it was enough to get him on the list for this week. Let's just take a look at Nussmeyer and Chandler. Nussmeyer, that's he's only had one game under 20. He's had 2 over at 37, and then 1 at 26. So Nussmeyer continues to put up numbers there at LSU. A little bit of my surprise. He's a name that had been off my radar a little bit as far as a guy that's having a really good season that I hadn't really noticed. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then Chandler Morris. Willie, you got anything on Chandler Morris for us? How he's been doing and how he managed to get on here? Oh yeah,
That to me is impressive.
yeah. We had noticed in kind of the notes that I put out on Sunday. Not only did Ginty get over 50 again, to keep his running back one spot. He is the overall player number one, which when you see any other position besides quarterback, they're putting in work. And so you've got a receiver and a running back
What?
that are
Yeah.
ahead of the top quarterback in the leagues.
Right. Right.
So pretty.
So
Mm-hmm.
to vault him to 12th.
Right. And prior to that, yeah, he had as his previous rating showed, he had been hovering around the top 16 at number 18 because his worst game was 15 points, and he had a couple in the mid 20s or high 20s, and another one to start the season with 42. So, I think he's definitely a guy you see stick around. I don't know that Nussmeyer will stick around if we had to kind of make a prediction here. He's outperforming, what I had as expectations for him, but I don't know that he's the top 16 caliber for the remainder of the year as they get into the heart of that SEC, though.
Right. Right.
So,
I agree with that for sure.
yep. But with that, again, now we have 2 Service Academy quarterbacks deep onto the list. Horvath from Navy moves up to number 3. Daly is up from 14 to 10. So we talked about the fact that this week Tulsa, Army has Tulsa, and we had 3 Army players on our waiver watch, Daly and
Mm-hmm.
2 other running backs. With you, and you took the running back, but you've got to go first here. So will you take a Service Academy quarterback to be your top performer this week? That will be the interesting question.
While I take my guy.
All right, that's cute. I'm okay. Good, great. We didn't plan that. We did not. We started
Right.
this show, start talking about Louisiana Monroe. We're finishing up with that, and we did not plan that one bit. So that's a great way to finish when we get to that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just
Yeah, I agree.
just a little bit too much.
Yep.
To me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go away from Barnett, as mentioned. I don't know that I'm a doubter of the kid's game, but he's certainly proven himself already this year. I'd like to think we discovered something interesting here with the Louisiana Monroe defense there, but we will find out this week. and I think he'll probably have a 20-plus point game. But Cade Klubnik has been super impressive to me. Florida State's in the shambles. Um, they're 96th against the pass. You know, sorry, I'm looking at rushing again. Let me get back to the correct
All
stat
right.
here. Hold on, give me a quick. I'm not changing my pick regardless of what I discover here. But 74th against the pass, giving up 150 yards a game. Again, that's the rating. 215 yards a game. Sorry, guys, I got a bunch of columns here. But as much as Florida State has, had a disappointing season, I think they put up just tough of enough game for Klubnik to have to go all out, play all four quarters. Not necessarily a close game, but a game where they won't be ahead 30-0 at any point, or by 4 touchdowns through most of the game. So I think Florida State can keep it close enough that he'll have to stay in, but they're bad enough that he can have a really good game, if that makes sense.
Okay.
All right. You follow that logic?
Um,
Okay. Yeah, he is
um,
our Kings Classic quarterback, one of them.
right.
So
Yeah.
now that Byron Brown's down, he might be the quarterback for us in the Kings Classic.
So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
We shall.
I like the pick. So
Okay.
um,
Now for worst pick.
uh,
Okay. I was thinking about him actually. That was most likely going to be my choice, and then, unless it's super obvious, I know we can pick the same guy. I'll stay away from him. Yeah, you have any notes on why, or that's your gut there? Because it.
no, you know
Mhm,
how.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and
So
that's one that jumps out that maybe you consider. I don't want to take that one either. I mean, I'm thinking Horvath versus Air Force maybe, because Air Force traditionally a little tougher. They know how to play the option. Um, they're 49th in scoring, which isn't a ton. They only give up 21 points a game. Uh, in comparison, South Carolina's only given up 17 points a game going against Jackson Dart, who I got some points off of last week.
mhm.
So, yeah, that's it. Not bad. Um, okay, I'm choosing here between Jackson Dart for worst and Horvath. And Jackson Dart had a down week last week. Let's go Horvath. Dart seems to bounce back when he has bad games. Who's that? A Horvath?
Horvath. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I really hate to doubt the kid. He's put up super impressive numbers all season long, but I'm scared of the Jackson Dart bounce back, which we experienced all last year. So he broke that mold prior to this week. He only had 16 this week, but he had been having just consistently good games all year long. But again, I think that's another reason he does bounce back. He's not the kid who's going to have back-to-back bad weeks in his history. So give it to him, even though he's playing a pretty tough South Carolina defense, surprisingly tough there.
Yeah, and then
30th, 30th in scoring. All right, so there it is. We have completed our best worst picks for the week. Gave you a lot of notes throughout. In particular, keep an eye out on that Louisiana Monroe defense. That should be a fun one against JMU. More fun than maybe people expected. Well, we'll see if our discovery is accurate. Any other final thoughts, Willie? Oh no, I just said over 200. But I'll go
Oh, over 200.
218,
Okay.
218 yards. And how
But
crazy could the Heisman stage look if with a group of 5 guy and Travis Hunter both there? If things go the way that they have for the first half, like those would be your 2 front runners, but potentially
right.
probably along with Milrow for your Heisman candidates.
So,
Yep,
as far
right.
as
He
kids
took the
coming out
long
of high
road.
school, that's what exactly. Yeah.
Yep,
That's
took the
long
long
story
road.
short. Took the long road.
Yep. All right, well, fun stuff to watch out for. That's it for me, Willie.